3 times I almost didn't make it home. When danger comes from places you never expected. My name is Marcus. I'm 28 years old now. And I need to tell you about 3 separate occasions when I came incredibly close to something terrible happening. 3 times when the only thing standing between me and a serious attack was pure luck, a moment of hesitation, or a stranger's kindness. 3 times when I learned that danger doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always come from dark alleys or obvious threats. Sometimes it comes from places that seem completely ordinary. Sometimes it comes from the restaurant where you work. Sometimes it comes from the neighbor who lives across the hall. And sometimes it comes from the darkness when you're just trying to take your dog for a walk. If you think you would know danger when you see it, these stories will prove you wrong. If you think your instincts would protect you, think again. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because what you're about to hear will make you understand that survival often comes down to one simple thing: being willing to fight back when it matters most. These are 3 times I almost didn't make it home. Story 1. The late shift. I used to work at my dad's restaurant when I was in my late teens and early 20s. It was just a regular local place. Nothing fancy, but it was open until 2 in the morning every single night. During high school, I would only work after school until 8. But once I graduated, I started working the closing shifts. I needed to save up money for college. The restaurant would be surprisingly busy at night, all the way up until closing. Mostly it was just people picking up online orders, but sometimes groups of friends would come in and hang out at one of the tables while they ate. I definitely preferred working at night though. I would be the only one there. I didn't have to listen to my dad bossing me around all night. After 6 months of working nights, things started to get pretty weird. It was almost closing time. Around 1:45 in the morning. I was in the back cleaning when I heard the door ring. I finished up what I was doing and made my way to the front counter. There were 2 young men standing in the dining room. They both looked really tired. One of them came up to the counter while the other one stood at one of the tables. "Our dining room is closed for the night," I said, "but I can still take a small order if you want it for takeout." The man at the counter just stared at the menu and didn't say anything. I stood there uncomfortably as the man shifted his gaze. He was looking behind me, as if he was inspecting the place, calculating something. A few seconds later, the man by the table quickly walked out. The other guy followed him. It was definitely the weirdest encounter I'd probably had in all my time working there. I couldn't really think of any reasonable explanation for their behavior. I kind of just assumed that they were planning on robbing me. But then they decided against it for some reason. Maybe they saw something that made them change their minds. The next morning, I told my dad about it. He said I could start locking the doors at around 1:45 for the next few days. Another week went by with nothing unusual before it happened again. I had a customer picking up an order around 1:30. Almost as soon as he left, one of the men from last week walked in. It was the one who had been standing at the table. I noticed right away that he was wearing the exact same clothing as last time. But this time, he came up to the counter. He looked me in the eyes for a second. Then he asked me if I could help him jumpstart his car. The way he said it was really creepy, and it was very obvious that there was something else going on here, something darker than a dead battery. "Sorry," I said. "I have to stay in the restaurant during my shift." His face immediately shifted into a frown. "It would only take a minute," he said, "and no one would know that I left." At that point, I knew something was very off. I started to panic a little bit in my head. He started making his way back to the door, gesturing for me to follow him. I honestly wasn't sure what to do. I was really freaking out. But my fight response was starting to kick in. My adrenaline was pumping. It's worth mentioning that I'm not really a big guy at all. This man was much larger than me. Plus, I was pretty confident that the other guy was nearby too, probably ready to jump me if I didn't comply. But I figured I was screwed either way, so I might as well try to fight. I grabbed a pair of scissors we had behind the counter and stood my ground. The man turned around again once he reached the door. This time, he looked angry. He demanded that I follow him. At that same instant, a loud bang came from behind me. The back door slammed open. I ran to the back, and as soon as the guy saw me, he bolted right back outside. I turned around quickly and ran back to the front counter, but the other guy had left as well. I obviously called the police afterwards and gave them the security footage, but it was pretty low quality and hard to make out any identity from the recordings. Anyways, I'm still not really sure why they didn't just attack me and rob the place. My best guess is that they were trying to rob the store without harming anyone. But as soon as they saw I was going to fight back, they ran. Those two guys could have easily taken me down and made the situation much worse. So I'm glad it didn't turn out that way. Because if that back door hadn't opened when it did, if someone hadn't come through at that exact moment, I don't know what would have happened to me. Story 2: The Neighbor. I lived in a small apartment for most of my 20s. It was all that I could afford since I lived alone. My complex was small, only 6 total apartments in it. Most of the people living there were older and retired. They kept to themselves. I actually liked that. I didn't have to interact with any of them every time I needed to go in or out of the complex. I was usually in a rush, or just not in the mood to socialize. I lived on the top floor. The apartment across from me had an old couple living there for almost 2 years before they moved out. I never talked to them, so I didn't really care when they left. But several months went by before someone new moved in, and another 2 weeks went by before I actually met them. I was getting ready for work one morning, preparing my packed lunch, when I heard the neighbor's door open. I didn't think much of it until another minute went by, and I realized that I never heard the door close. I finished getting ready and put my shoes on. Then I opened my door to leave. I immediately noticed that the neighbor's door was still open, and a tall man in his 40s or 50s was standing right outside the door, facing me. He smiled and introduced himself. I faked a short smile and told him my name. Then I said I had to go to work and began walking past him. But as I started down the stairs, he asked me to come in for a little bit and have breakfast with him. This was really weird. I just told him that I needed to go to work, but I just said sorry and continued down the stairs and out of the complex. While I was at work that day, I thought about how strange the interaction was. The casual way he had asked, the way he was standing right in the doorway, waiting for me. Thankfully, when I got back home, I was able to get into my apartment without any interactions. But the next morning, I woke up to a knock at the front door. I was really annoyed because I had worked that day. Now I was up early. But I quickly got dressed and opened the front door. My neighbor was there. But strangely, he was standing right in front of his open door again. He asked me to join him for breakfast again, to which I obviously declined, and told him in a more aggressive manner to not knock on my door so early. The man didn't seem very happy about my answer. He just kind of stood there, Then he said that I didn't have to leave for work for a while, and I had enough time to eat with him. I knew that there was something wrong with this guy. There was a lot about that response that was creepy. The way he knew when I worked, or when I had days off. The way he was keeping track of my schedule. I firmly said no. Then I backed away and closed my door, making sure to lock it. The rest of that day went by as usual. I got home around 6, made some dinner and watched a movie. Got ready for bed around 11. I laid in bed for a while thinking about my creepy neighbor and wondering what to do about it. I decided that if anything else happened, I'd contact the owner of the complex and have him talk to the guy. Then I leaned over and turned off my lamp and tried to fall asleep. But a few minutes later, I heard the neighbor's door creak open. I waited silently, listening to what the guy was doing. But I couldn't hear anything else. Again, though, I never heard the door close. I was pretty nervous, unsure of what the man could possibly be doing this late at night. Eventually, though, I drifted to sleep, due to not hearing any further noises for over an hour. I'm not sure how long I slept before a loud knock at the door woke me up. But these knocks didn't come from my front door. They were at my bedroom door. I shot up completely terrified and turned on the lights. The only thing I had to defend myself with was a small screwdriver on my nightstand. I grabbed it and stood next to my bed, shaking in fear, before picking up my phone and calling 911. When they arrived at the front door, I quickly got out of my room and opened it. I was surprised the door was even shut, but I told the officers everything and all about my suspicions of the neighbor. Unfortunately, though, there was no real evidence of a break-in, and they couldn't do much at all. I knew what I heard was real, though, and I did not feel safe in my apartment anymore. I called my sister later that day, and she agreed to let me stay at her place for a few days. Those days went by quicker than I hoped, and I started driving back to my apartment on Saturday evening. I tried to stay calm, assuring myself that the guy had given up by now, and everything would be okay. I pulled into the parking lot and made my way into the building. The sun had just set, so the staircase was dim. I slowly made my way up, trying to stay quiet, so my neighbor wouldn't know that I was coming up. Once I reached the top, I saw his door was closed, and I got a big sense of relief. I quickly made my way through my door and locked it behind me. I dropped my bag in the hallway and turned on the lights. As I turned the corner into my living room, I jumped back, screaming. The man was sitting right on my couch, staring at me with a wide, awful smile. I sprinted out of the entire complex and into my car, then called the police again and waited for them in a nearby parking lot. When they arrived about 10 minutes later, we drove up to the complex, and they went into the apartment while I waited by my car. Surprisingly, they came out just a minute later with the man in handcuffs. They said he was still sitting on the couch and that they also found a small knife in his pocket. The most disturbing part of this whole situation, though, was that when he was questioned, he admitted to breaking in 3 separate times. I only knew about 2 incidents, which meant that at one point he was hiding in my apartment, probably watching me, without me even knowing. I moved out of that apartment the same week, and I never went back. Story 3. The Pack. I have a little Jack Russell dog named Maggie, and she has a lot of energy. So when we go for walks, it's not uncommon for them to stretch to the 2-hour mark. This particular day, I got home from work around 5:30. The sun doesn't usually set until 6:30 or 7. Almost immediately after walking through the door, I put her leash on, quickly changed clothes, and then we headed out. The walk went as usual. Maggie just took me in whichever direction she wanted to walk. Things didn't start to take a turn until about an hour in, when the sun was almost fully down, and unfortunately for me, I had walked further than I realized. If you take your dog for long walks, you know how easy it is to zone out, especially if your dog rarely stops to sniff. We had walked in a direction I had taken normally, but the particular street I was on was unfamiliar. But I still knew the general direction home. I started to turn around, but Maggie was standing still. And then she began whimpering softly. And that's when I saw it. Through the soft light of the sunset, I could make out a huge coyote staring at us. In the middle of the street, it was roughly the size of a golden retriever, with matted fur, and with its mouth partially opened, you could see its disgusting, sharp yellow teeth. I knew exactly what it wanted. I picked Maggie up and started walking the opposite direction. I was a bit fearful, but for some reason I thought it would just go away. I didn't know these streets very well, but what I didn't know was that I had to keep moving. As I quickly continued, the coyote slowly followed, keeping its distance. Still, but the darker it got, the more scared I became. And after walking down random neighborhood roads in the darkness for a while, I came to the horrifying realization that I was lost. All the turns had messed with my sense of direction, and I had no idea which way to go. Through the darkness, I could now see the glowing eyes of the beast, and could now hear it yipping and howling. As I walked further through the dark neighborhood streets, every few minutes, another set of glowing eyes would appear behind me. An even louder howl. I could tell they were getting closer too. I was absolutely terrified at this point, trying to hold back my tears as I was panicking and fearing for both mine and my dog's life. Every once in a while, I'd pass a streetlight and look behind me, revealing the entire pack walking slowly, with their heads down, watching my every move. After almost 45 minutes of being followed, I began tiring, and I knew I was far from the safety of my home. Maggie began whimpering louder too, which made me even more emotional, as I knew that she was aware of what may soon happen. The howling and yipping became more frequent, growing louder and closer. I looked back one more time to see all of their eyes staring at me, from only 30 to 40 feet away. But suddenly and strangely, they all began to separate, moving to the sides of the road. A few moments later, a small car slowly made its way between the crowd of coyotes and stopped right next to me. A lady rolled down her window and asked me if I needed help. I was so thankful for her and told her to please take me home. There are almost no circumstances in which I would willingly get into a stranger's car, but I really had no other choice. The lady was really nice and seemed terrified for me. I was crying at this point, knowing I had just been moments away from a grueling attack. She kindly dropped me off at my house, which was almost 20 minutes from where she picked me up. I live in a nice neighborhood, one where you don't have to worry about your house being broken into or carjackings, the only growing problem in our neighborhood, and many neighboring ones as well, is coyotes. It's been a few years since this incident happened to me, and as time went on, there became more and more showing up around town, getting bigger and stronger. The public knows to be cautious, especially in parks where there are tons of trees and places for them to make home. Signs were put up letting people know of the popular areas, where anywhere between 3 and 20 have been spotted. There have been news stories coming out, such as groups of coyotes leaping over fences and taking small dogs, and larger animals being found torn apart in kids' parks. Very sad stories, and some even a little scary. But you never think of coyotes as being an immediate danger, until you're being followed in the middle of the night by a pack of the hungry and merciless. Epilogue: Survival. I've spent the last several years thinking about these 3 incidents: the 2 men at the restaurant, the neighbor in my apartment, the pack of coyotes in the darkness. And I've come to understand something that I wish I didn't have to know. Danger is everywhere. And most of the time, survival comes down to one thing: being willing to fight. When those men tried to lure me out of the restaurant, I could have gone with them. I could have been polite. I could have been helpful. And I probably wouldn't be here to tell this story. But instead, I grabbed those scissors and I stood my ground. And because of that, they ran. When my neighbor came into my apartment without permission, I could have been too shocked to call the police. I could have tried to reason with him, to understand what he wanted. But I called immediately, and the police arrived in time. When the coyotes were closing in on me in the darkness, I could have panicked. I could have run randomly through the streets and gotten myself completely lost. But instead, I kept moving. I stayed calm enough to keep Maggie in my arms. And when that car appeared, I didn't hesitate. I got in. Because sometimes survival means making the choice that your instincts are screaming at you to make. Sometimes it means fighting back. Sometimes it means calling for help. And sometimes it means trusting a stranger. The people who didn't make it home, the people who became statistics, they didn't necessarily make the wrong choices. They just didn't have the luck that I had. They didn't have someone open a back door at the right moment. They didn't have the police arrive quickly enough. They didn't have a stranger pass by when they needed it most. So here's what I want you to understand. Pay attention to your instincts. Even if it seems rude, even if it seems paranoid, if someone is giving you bad vibes, trust that feeling. If a situation doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. And most importantly, be willing to fight. Because predators count on you being passive. They count on you being polite. They count on you doing what they ask. But if you surprise them, if you show them that you're willing to resist, 9 times out of 10, they'll move on to someone easier. Stay safe. And remember, sometimes the difference between life and death is just the willingness to say no.